Vada. Okay. So the next bracha that we're holding is Reino V'Yenu, V'Rivi Rivenu, U'Galeinu Manshmecha. So in the sequence, what we're holding is that simply the pshat of this verse, of this passage, of this blessing, is that it's talking about redemption, Gula. U'Galeinu ki Geula chazakata Baruch Hashem Goel Yisrael. Hashem is a Goel Yisrael, the Redeemer. So redemption, Gula. But the truth is that this is kind of complicated because Geula, when we're talking about redemption, is really it speaks about much later, right? When you talk about Yerushalayim Mircha and Asamcha David Avdecha, it's going to be talking about redemption. That's going to be talking about redemption. It's not working. That's going to be talking about redemption. Another thing is we mentioned from the Avudram that you remember there's 6 and 6. That the first, there's 12 middle, 12, 13 middle, 12 originally, 13 with the added. The first 12 is for the Yachid, which means requesting for things of the individual. The second 6 things are connected to the collective. 666, that's basically the way it's divided, 666. Actually, the Zohar, this week's Parsha, says that Sheish Yisrael David is the 6 brachas, the 3 before Shemanas, and the 3 afterwards. So that's 6 as of Shvach and Amidah. Those are 6. So 3 of Shvach, of saying praise, 3 of Amidah, giving thanks at the end. 6 for the individual, 6 for the collective. An individual and the collective itself, he said the first 3 is for physical, spiritual, and the second 3 is for more for physical things. So what is Re'enov? How does this fit in? How does this bracha actually fit in to the sequence of the bracha? So we talked about tshuva, you talk about das, awareness, you talk about tshuva, return, you talk about mechil and slicha, which is forgiveness, and then you talk about now is about redemption, a redemptive state. So the Gemara actually says, the Gemara asks this question. The Gemara in Megillah, the first page, is Zayin Amud Beis. The Gemara says that Ma umaro loimer Gula b'shvius. Why do we say Gula in the Shvius? Why do we say the Gula in the 7th? So the Gemara actually, this is the famous Gemara. The Gemara actually goes through all the brachas and says why each one was established one after the next in sequence. But why the 7th? And the question of why the 7th is really a double question. First of all, why the 7th? What does the number 7 have to do? Because it's be the seventh blessing. But more importantly, why here? Why does it belong here? It doesn't really belong here. It really belongs either later on, but definitely not here. So the Gemara says that the reason why it's in the 7th is since the redemption is going to happen in the 7th year, then therefore it mentions the idea it's in the 7th bracha. So the Gemara says, "V'amar b'shishi koila is b'shvi milchamas." In the 6th year will be complications or battles, or a lot of rumblings, and the 7th year will be war, and then Moitza Shvi is David Ba, which means the year after Shvi is the year after Shemitah, after the 7th year, which is the 8th year. So the Gemara says, that even the beginning of the wars, it's 7th, so therefore we put it in the 7th, because it's the beginning of redemption. What redemption? So look at Rashi. Rashi right away says something very important, and Rashi is really answering the question of that we just asked. Why does this belong here? This technically belongs later on with Yerushalayim and Esamach. When we talk about redemption, we talk about Mashiach. That's when you should talk about Gula. That's when you talk about redemption. The building of Yerushalayim and the Mashiach coming. That's when you talk about redemption. Why is redemption talking about here? So the Rashi says like this: Afagav the high Gula lav Gula de Godless. Even though we're not talking about a Gula de Godless, which means we're not talking about redemption from exile. Ela shiganu min atzaras habois lein tamid, and we're talking about redemption that occurs to us in exile, a specific type of redemptions, not Gula Klolus, a general redemption. That's what also we said that this is connected to the month of, that's like last month was connected, each of them are connected to that month. This is connected to the month of Adar. So Adar is a Kate Avdi da Chashvesh, how we say, that we're still slaves to Chashvesh, which means it's not a Gula Klolus, it's not a general redemption, but it's a redemption of a particular hardship. And Rashi says, so, but still, because it's connected, Gula Gula, then we put it here. In other words, Rashi establishes that we're talking about not a Geula Klawless, a general redemption, a redemptive state, Mashiach, but we're talking about Gula Pratius. Specific redemptions that happen for the Klal Yisrael throughout. Now, this can be seen as a Gula Klawless, a general redemption of the Klal Yisrael, for all of Klal Yisrael, in Godless, in exile. Or it can also be talking about a personal redemption. Just like we're talking about Slicha, Slach lo Novini, Chatonu, Tshuva, and Slicha, which is a process of Tshuva and of healing and freeing of being feeling the sense of being forgiven. There's also this idea of Re'eno V'Nyenu, which is a Geula Pratis, a personal inner redemption. We'll see what this means, but this is what we're talking about, really. Re'eno V'Nyenu means that when we say the bracha, let's say what the sensation is. The feeling that you're supposed to get, if you daven with this tefillah correctly, is at the end you should feel redeemed. Just like, we'll talk about what that means, but at the end you should feel redeemed. Just like we said before, in the end of the previous bracha, you should feel Chara Marbel Slayach means you should feel in present tense, you should feel forgiven, you should feel light, you should feel unburdened. Here you should feel in a state of redemption. So what is redemption and what is Godless? Personal, inward redemption and inward exile. So the Baal Shem Tov writes like this. This is a Torah of Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem writes this many times. So we have a few Mar Mekaymus over here. That in your Godless Mitzrayim, the Gulas Mitzrayim, that the idea of Godless, exile of Mitzrayim, and redemption of Mitzrayim, this is generally speaking. The same thing also a person has personal redemption. There's a collective redemption and there's a personal redemption. Shemati Pirush al Pasik, Karvel Nafshi Geula. That Karvel Nafshi Geula, that's close to me, the redemption. That Karvel Nafshi Geula means my personal redemption. I feel redeemed. Ki koidem shi yispalel al Gula Klalis says this is a big chiddush, right? You say that's the Gula Pratis. Okay, there's a personal redemption. But koidem shi yispalel al Gula Klalis tzorich shi yispalel Gula Pratis l'nafshay. That a person has to first daven. That's what actually we're going to do, right? We're gonna speak about personal redemption, and then v'lushalayim ircha, and a samach daven is going to be klawless redemption. But a person has to first daven for his pratistik, his individual redemptive state, and then his collective. If you look in the Mar Mekaymus, in the notes over here, he brings down. Like for example, that Godless is Shibud Yetzahara, like this idea of Shibud Yetzahara, the enslaved to the Yetzahara. Let's see the next story from the Baal Shem. So this is the Gula.
What is the note saying?
I don't remember.
Yeah, what's covering it up? I mean, what?
No, it's okay. It says, Lo rak tzarich lispalel koydem al Gula Pratis. Not only did the Baal Shem say you have to daven a Gula Pratis, ela rak la'acha Gula Pratis yachali a Gula Klalis. But the Baal Shem actually says that that not only does it say you should daven before, but it cannot be a Gula Klalis. You can't have a general until you have a specific. What is it? Go look at the next Torah from the Baal Shem. In Shuas Chen, he brings down the next Torah in the Baal Shem Bereshis. So that's in Shmois. This is Bereshis Baal Torah. He brings down Amar Baal Shem b'ner Karvel Nafshi Geula, the same lashon. Shu tefila al Gula Pratis on nefesh loy megolas Yetzahara. Kol echa ve'echa Gula Pratis. It means it's said clearly. In other words, not only do you have to daven, you have to pray. First for Gula Pratis and then for Gula Klalis. He says you cannot have a Gula Klalis if you don't have a Gula Pratis. This is a big chiddush, right? This is a tremendous chiddush. What is Gula Pratis? He's saying that we cannot talk about a collective redemption if you're not in a state of redemption. In simple language, in very simple language, this means that you see this happen with Klal Yisrael. With going out of Mitzrayim, that Klal Yisrael were redeemed with a Gula Klalis, but not necessarily did they have a Gula Pratis, which means on their own personal level, not on the collective level. On the personal level, they were in the close to the 50th Sha'ar Tumah, right when they left Mitzrayim, and then they were right away swept out and took out of Mitzrayim. How do you see that they were so close to the 50th thing? Because 50 days later, which is supposed to be the Cherus, the time of complete freedom, Cherus Me'etzahara, Cherus Me'alchamavis. They receive the Torah. And then, a short while later, 40 days later, they serve the Egel with the same passion, the same excitement that they went to Mount Torah with the same excitement, which means that they didn't experience a Gula Proteus, which means they were in an inner state of constriction, or whatever state they were, in a negative state. And even though they were swept up in the euphoria of this klolistic, this general, they were induced to this higher state, but in the protistic level they weren't there. So therefore, they were taken out b'chipazon. They were taken out very quickly. But like the pasuk says in Yeshai, that in the future, we're not going to exit b'chipazon very quickly. Dafka b'chipazon, we left Mitzrayim because we weren't equipped to it. We weren't ready for it. We weren't open to it. But Dafka l'asalav, it says that we're going to be loy b'chipazon. But we're going to go slowly, which means we're going to attain, hopefully God willing, a certain level of a redemptive state, a Gula Proteus, and then when we enter the Gula Proteus, is going to allow us to experience the Gula close in a real way, in an everlasting way. Otherwise, it's not going to last. Right? We have to be equipped to receive the experience. And what is the Godless? What is the Godless? So Godless is. There's a lashon also in the Tolas Mitzvah. We don't have it here, but there's a lashon also from the Hashem that Misha daite begolus, Misha daite begolus Yetzahara nikra golus Mitzrayim. That someone that has a golus, an exile, a restriction, a certain type of constriction in the golus of the Yetzahara, then of his evil inclination, his negative inclination, this is a person that's in a state of golus Mitzrayim. Okay, so there's golus Mitzrayim, there's Gula. What is the Godless Mitzrayim? You have to understand what this is. To understand what is really... Okay, you could say simply it means that a person is he's enslaved to his passions, to his desires, to his lower self, to his animalistic self, right? That's the simple level of Godless. But
based on what you're saying from the Baal Shem Tov, there's a breakthrough that a person can achieve.
Correct.
That must achieve.
They must achieve. And what's the Godless? The Godless really, in the Torah Baal Shem, Hashem writes more clearly in other places that Godless is a Godless Adas, right? And Geula is a Gulas Adas. This Godless Adas is a constricted state of Das, exiled state, or a small state, Katan Samoichin, which is Das, and then there's the Godless Adas. So what's Das? What is this? So it also says, later by another Svarim, that Godless Mitzrayim is the Godless of Das, and also the Koyach HaDimyon of a person. Because the Koyach HaDimyon is the fourth level of Seichel, the fourth level of intelligence. So there's four Madregas, the four exiles, right, but the fourth level is the Koyach HaDimyon, the power of imagination, which is also, if you take the body itself. So there's the Atzamos, and there's the Gidim, and there's the Basar, and there's the Oir. Right? Every level of skin has these four levels. You have the bones itself, then you have the veins, then you have the Basar, the flesh, and then you have the Oir. That's not the flesh, that's the skin, and then the skin. So the skin, the Oir, is connected to Koyach HaDimyon, to the power of imagination. That's the fourth level of Seichel. That's why the Nachash, which is Hu Malach HaMavis, Hu Yetzahar, the Nachash, is the snake, is the Koyach HaDimyon, is the power of imagination in its negative form. That's what Sifuna writes, that the Koyach HaNachash is fantasy. That a person is stuck into the world of fantasy, which means that a person is also stuck into the world that they can't function with a proper positive power of imagination. So what that means, very simply means, when a person is in a constricted state of Golus Proteus, they're stuck in their life, whatever the situation is. I don't know, whatever. Think about your own life, wherever you're stuck in that state, and you don't even have the koyach to imagine the possibility of an alternative. This is the Golus Adas, which means I'm stuck in this perception, and I can't even imagine a better way to think about it. So my koyach imagination is stuck. Is negative. Correct. So and that's why it's stuck in the world of fantasy, which is the world of it's just fantasy. That's what it is. It's not.
Tahara comes from the ability to imagine.
Correct. Torah calls it ability to imagine. Correct.
Yeah, the root.
Correct. So yeah, Shemek, that's correct. So the negative thing is when you're stuck in like the negative side of imagination and stuck into the world of fantasy. But there's also this idea, which is the klippas hadas or the Godless hadas, the restriction of being in a state of das of klippa. Das of klippa means, I can understand it at two levels. I can understand this on a simple level means there's a certain perception of who you think you are, who you think everything around you is, and you get stuck in that narrative, and everything that you see through that prism, through those lights, through those lenses. If let's say you decided, there's a famous mashal, it's not a mashal, actually, it really happened, that when they first landed in the Americas, one of the explorers sent back a letter, and said, you know the story? They sent back a letter and they wrote, Umberto Eco writes about it in case you want to know, but he writes that they wrote back a letter and they said that they saw a unicorn because they're coming to a new land, they're going to see a unicorn. He said, but the problem with the unicorn, he said it's a unicorn, but the unicorn is not mamish white. It's a little dark. It's like a very dark animal. And it's not a very thin animal. It's a very thick animal. It's not very gracious. It walks very slow. Turns out it was a rhinoceros. You understand? Why? Because the guy was looking to come to America to find unicorns. And he saw a rhinoceros. A rhinoceros and a unicorn is like, I don't know, it's Boydem and Klotz. That's two different things that never happened. By the way, Chazal say there was a unicorn, right? Shoish, the other Mauritian has the Gemara says in Erevin that had the parashal that other Mauritian Shoichet had one Karen. So I don't know. This could be a marker in Chazal for this idea, but the L'Poel, they found in America a rhinoceros somewhere in the Americas. I don't know where exactly, but the point is when you have a certain perception of what you're going to look for, that's what you see. You see whatever's on your imagination, whatever you have to have, whatever you think about. There's the Ramban, the famous Ramban, that says that Isha Nida sees blood wherever she looks, or looks in the Mara. There's what I'm a lot of the Ben Ochai say, a lot of Talmid Ramban speak about it. Because when you're stuck in a certain story, this is what you start seeing everywhere around you. That's one thing. That's one type of Godless hadas. The Godless hadas, you're stuck, and then you can't. You're stuck in a certain perception of the way things are, and you can't imagine it any other way. But on a nafshistic level, even a more internal level, this is something we can really think about it, because this can be very general. Okay, so let's say you have a relationship with your spouse or your child. So you have a certain way. I think my child is this or that, and it locked in. This is the way, or my parents. You lock in a certain thing. This is the way I think about them, and people change, but you're not willing to see that because you're always seeing them through this certain prism, that the way you always see them. So you're stuck. That's the gullus. You can't see another way. You're stuck in this way. But on a nafshistic level, I think it's actually even deeper, which is there's certain things that triggered certain type of emotions that you associated with a certain thing that happened in the past. And when the same external circumstance happens, it triggers the same emotion even though you're not in that place. Let me give you an example. There could be many examples. Let me give you a simple example. Is let's say, chas v'shalom, your parents were screamed at each other. I don't know. They had a good relationship, but they screamed at each other. Every time you were screaming, there was a lot of anger, and you were always, this is the way you experienced screaming. Let's say your spouse or your good friend talks very loud. That's the nature, not because they're angry. There's no anger. There's nothing behind the voice. It's just that they talk very loud. If you're going to hear a loud voice, it's going to trigger automatically the trauma that you had, or the experience that you had, that you associated that loud voice with being angry. And the other person's not really angry. They're just talking very loud. Just wants to make a point. He says, why are you so angry at me? I'm not really angry. I'm just talking very loud. You understand? Because you're right away associating something that you heard, the same sound triggers a certain way of how you experienced it.
It creates your experience.
It creates your experience of how you're going to see it. This is what Godless hadas is. Godless hadas means when you're stuck in a certain way and you're only living out the ways that you experienced in the past. That's how you're living out your whole life now. There's no possibility to see it in an alternative way, because you. This is why you would say it's like it's not only stuck in patterns of of addiction or patterns of negative behavior, Yitzhara. It's even in not necessarily negative things. You associate that with this, its attachment is to that particular story, and therefore you're always connected to it. This is the Godless Hadas. So what's the Gula Sadas? What's the Gula? How do you have the Gula Sadas? Because in Einov and Yeni we're talking about, like we said this before, that's Karva Nashigala. We're talking about not just Gula Pratius for Klal Yisrael in the general, but you're talking about a personal redemptive state that a person wants to be redeemed. And what's the experience redemption? This is what you're asking for. What's this redemption? So let's look at the next story from the Hashem. Shemaiti Mori. Shemaiti Mori, that I heard from my teacher, that Ki'inu Golos Mitzrayim Hu Shechosim Hadas Sheyedu Lachi Yishes Boyer Echad HaMachadish Tu B'chom Tomas V'Reishis Atcha B'al Moshe Rabbeinu. These are very, very big words, and there are a lot of encoded words, but it's a lot of things. Golos Mitzrayim was, what's the Golos Mitzrayim? That they're stuck in a place that they don't have proper das. Okay, so what is proper das? They're stuck in a certain conception, which we can say is they're avodim, right? They're slaves. They think they're slaves. They believe themselves to be slaves, and they're stuck as slaves. They're stuck not only in being oppressed as slaves, but their das is. That's why the Zohar says that the Godless of Mitzrayim was Godless Hadas, which means they believe themselves to be slaves. They were stuck in that slave mentality. How do we know we're stuck in the slave mentality? Because they never complain. They never actually. It's hundreds of years. They never say we don't want to be we don't want to be slaves. The first time that they cry out is Vayamas Malach Mitzrayim, when there was a break in the action, and then. So then there was like some type of break. The Netziv says maybe they got a day off, or they thought they were going to get a day off. There was some type of break of their normal pattern of behavior, and then there was a crying out. But they were stuck. Okay, so they were stuck. So what's the Gula? And the real oimik of Godless Mitzrayim, not in just in Godless Hadas, but in the story, the actual story of Mitzrayim, is that they were avodim la'avodim. That's really what the problem is, right? They became enslaved to a slave. They became a slave to man. So what were they missing? What was the chesarn of the das that they were missing? The chesarn of das that they were missing, of what type of proper awareness? V'yadam mitzrayim keni Hashem. That there's something beyond that, right? That they're not stuck. That b'ni b'choy b'yisol, that they can break themselves out of freedom, because their relationship to life is not through pare. What does a slave think? A slave thinks, a person that's enslaved and in a slave condition thinks that my livelihood, my life, is dependent on this master. I can't make it outside this master. Right? That's what a slave mentality is. The master is my life. He gives me my food, my sustenance. I can't live without him. Right? So, Klal Yisrael living in the state of Mitzrayim means Pari is the master. So v'yadam Mitzrayim k'nei Hashem, or Klal Yisrael v'yadu k'nei Hashem b'karav haaretz. We should know that there's a Kadosh Baruch Hu, which means that we're not a slave to Pari. That's the idea. But if you look in the Lashon of Hashem, the Hashem has a few oisias here. First of all, he says, "Sheyedu lachi yesh boyer echad." We should know that there is a boyer, that there is a creator. Hamachadish v'tuv b'choy tomas v'reishis, and this creator is machadish v'tuv b'choy tomas v'reishis. So they were missing two things. They were missing both an awareness that there is a creator, and they were also missing the awareness that the boyer is a machadish v'tuv b'choy tomas v'reishis. That is a continuous creation. Ad sheba Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu came and taught them two things. Moshe Rabbeinu is Bechinas Das, right? Moshe is also Chachma, and he's Das. That Moshe Rabbeinu came and revealed to them that there's a boira, and the boira is a Machadish Tuv B'chol Ma'aseh Bereishis. That there's a boira is a continuous creation. What does it mean? It means when a person is stuck in Golus Hadas, what's the Golus Hadas? Golus Hadas is, I'm really stuck in a certain story or a certain idea that I had when I was 10, 5, 20, whatever that idea was. And that lodged itself into my mind. And that's the way I think about these particular things. Maybe you get married and you think this is who your wife is or your husband is. And for the next 50 years, that's the same person. You think, that's it. That's the person. That's my child. That's me. And then even deeper, that's you. right? You lock yourself into who you are, and that's the person I am. Or with a certain sensation that arises from a particular sound or condition, and I say that's the reality it is. So two things you have to recognize. One is that there's a boyer, which means there's a higher force, but that's not good enough. You have to recognize that is that is a continuous creation. What's the continuous aspect of the creation? The continuous aspect of the creation that is which means every moment is new, is that I'm alive. I'm not stuck to anything that I thought yesterday. Why? Because today is a new day. What makes a person stay in the state of Godless? The reason why a person is in a state of Godless is because they lock in their mind into something that happened 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. They lock it in and they say that is the truth of the reality of this. Yeah, but 20 years later, you're not that same person. 20 years later, the whole experience is different. So the renewal of the awareness that things are constantly changing, and you're constantly changing. There's a person says, these things trigger me to have these particular machshavas. I don't know if you have this experience, but there's certain things I can tell you with the Diable. So for example, I'll give you this emotion, maybe you can think about it in your own life. When I was younger, I used to get headaches when I fast. I don't know. That was a thing. I used to get headaches. I don't get headaches anymore. I don't get a headache when I fast. But every time I fast, there's a little part of me that says I should be getting a headache because I'm fasting. And that's that thought itself makes me a headache. It's a phantom pain, you understand? It doesn't exist anymore, but you're so used to that's the way it should be, so you automatically trigger your own self to be in that condition. It's a preconceived notion of what was true maybe even a year ago. Let's say you were struggling with one thing. Now you overcame the struggle. You're tempted with the same thing. But you're not struggling with this. Don't think the problem of getting stuck in Golas Adas is that you always try to lock things in as they were. But the Gulas Adas, this is Moshe Rabbeinu. That's what Moshe is the Bechina of Chachma. What's Chachma? Chachma is Kimin Amayim Yeshisiyu, which is Chachma is the Koyach Ma. Koyach Ma is the potential of what? The Koyach Ma is the Koyach of Ayin. The Koyach of Moshe to release us from the Das of Klippa is the Bechinas Ayin. The Bechinas Ayin of Moshe allows. That's why it's the healthy Das, right? It's the correct midah of Das, because the correct midah of Das is because the Bechin of Moshe, which is the idea of the ischachus. That's why Chachma Ayin Timatzeh, right? Because the ischachus comes from Ayin, comes from Chachma, because that's something renewal. The koyach of the renewal of the boira. Not just that there's a boira. There's a boira. Okay, so the Eibusha created the world. That's the way the world. It's fixed. What happened yesterday is exactly what happened, and it's going to happen tomorrow. It's going to happen the next day. It's not true. Every machshava that you have today is different than the machshava you had yesterday, right? Every tefillah, the Arizal writes that every tefillah you have every single day is different than the tefillah you had the day before. And the Baal Shem says every machshava zara you had today is very different than the one that you had before. So it works, it's all consistent. Every single moment you're alive, every single moment is different. Don't get stuck. Yeah?
Avodai.
Yeah?
It shouldn't be really avodai because you're using the same terminology as Evet.
Good shiloh. Good shiloh. That's another shiloh. We have to talk about it, but it's a good shiloh. That's not that. It's just not that.
That's when we want to be stuck.
It depends. There could be a good type of stuck. We're talking about the stuckness that is not allowing you to grow, to be aware of the meschadish b'chol yom, b'chol rega v'rega, the renewal that's happening every single moment, and therefore I'm stuck in certain things that are not letting me grow forward, to be better.
Is that what you call? Is that what trauma is? Trauma is
Yeah.
something triggers me to feel.
Correct. That's exactly what trauma is. Trauma is you're having the same experience today. It's a trigger, and unfortunately, just to have you know this, and you're a psychologist, you can confirm this. But basically, on a scientific level, if you're re-experiencing trauma, the brain, the mind, and the body actually doesn't know if it's real or fake, the trauma, and you're actually re-experiencing as if it happened 20 years ago. Because if you're having the same trigger reaction, the body is actually holding it as if it just happened 5 seconds ago. So you can't say, oh, it's just a memory and just causing trauma. No. If you had a very traumatic experience 20 years ago and you keep on thinking about it, you're constantly living with it. And it's constantly new. So, okay, that's a negative trauma. I'm talking about even like regular patterns of normal behavior. You're 30, you're different than when you were 13. You had a different Yitzhar when you were 13, you have a different Yitzhar when you're 30. Stop thinking that you're the same 13-year-old. Stop thinking you're the same 30-year-old if you're a 40-year-old. And stop thinking that you're the person that you were yesterday if you're the person that you're today. If you are alive, which you are, Baruch Hashem, you're alive, which means you're growing and you're processing and you're developing, recognize the mischadish b'chol rega v'rega, and that with the proper chachma bina, with the proper understanding that there's a boira that's mischadish b'chol rega v'rega. Therefore, there's a koyach ein sofius that's giving you every moment new, and therefore, just because something happened yesterday, or you were stuck yesterday, or because yesterday there was a certain trigger, this particular emotion, doesn't mean it has to happen today. And if you do that, you're just stuck in the same, you're repeating the same, 99% of the person's thoughts are the same thoughts that they had yesterday. This is a terrible, terrible truth, because you're just repeating the same picture over and over again in different situations. You have a certain idea of how people are, and then you're just seeing it every single person you meet. You have a certain opinion of how your spouse is or your children are, and then you're seeing it every single child. But that's Godless, and you're seeing that within yourself. This is the oimek really of Godless haprotius. The Godless haprotius, the Godless Mitzrayim, is this madrega, and then the Gula has to be a Gula of that. It has to be a Gula redemption of that, and that's the mischadish and the boira. If you look in the next Maramakim, the next Maramakim is from the Ramak, and this is what the Ramak writes. Reino v'yonyenu, says the Ramak. This is Tefillah Moshe, the Siddur of the Ramak. That no b'chol makim him shtei shemes. No b'chol makim rei no v'yonyenu. Why do we say rei no? Please, you don't say the chanein no. What's the no? Please, what's the no? So he says, no, b'chol makom him shtei shemes, yutke vavke shemekem. It's the name of Hashem and the name Eke. Eke oilam chafeh aleph. Yutke vavke baba is oil chavav. Is shloishim. It's 30, right? 26 and is 30. Together, v'kol b'yachad oilam nun aleph. V'hainu, that's 51. V'hainu chachma bina. What? Nun bina chamishim sharim, nun sharim, aleph chachma ima. That the nun aleph re'ei na is the nekuda of chachma bina. The nekuda of chachma bina is the madrega of a redeemed das. Why? Because what's bina? What bina is lahav and davar b'seich davar. That's what bina is, right? Bina means I make sense of the thing that I already know. I know this, and I'm lahav and davar b'seich davar. I'm bain. Bina is bina bain. I'm drawing a parallel between one thing and the next thing. But I already have an idea. That's what bina is. You're mispashed in the nekuda, right? But you already have a nekuda, right? That's the whole idea of bina, is there's already a certain idea, and the idea, I'm fatayach the whole idea. So, opening up, expanding it, developing it.
A lot of times it could be like taking your initial thought and saying it's completely wrong and showing how it's correct.
Okay, that's something else. Okay, so that it's contrary to. But let's say chachma bina terei endel mispashed. Okay, I'll tell you what. No, it's the same nekuda. In other words. I got it, but either way, you're taking the nekuda. In other words, you're working already with a certain idea. Like that's why the isha is connected to bina yaseir. So you're dealing with already a zer, a mitzias, and then you fatayach it. Either taka destroying it, saying it's not a good thought, or developing it further and enhancing. But regardless, already you're talking about that. There's already a nekuda. There's a nekuda. Then you fatayach the nekuda. Chachma. This is what the Ramak is saying. That the Geula, I mean, if you tie into Torah Hashem, the Geula, because Reino V'Nyenu is the Gula. They see the Gula. Reino V'Nyenu is that Geula comes really, Gula is das, but really it's coming from Chachma. Why? Because Chachma is the Barak HaMavrik. Chachma is the intuition. Chachma is Chachma Ayin Tamatzah. Chachma comes from nothing. Chachma is the newness, is Chachas. You're saying that the Nekuda of Chachas that drops into Bina is what's going to give you the proper das. In other words, if I just have Bina, right? I know first I'll give you an example of Bina. Bina is already, I have a certain idea. This guy, I think of this person this way. Intuitively, I think this guy is a chaysos. right? And then for the next 5 years, 10 years, I'm developing how I think about this person in my bina. You understand?
It's a rhinoceros.
Whatever, he's a rhinoceros, exactly. He's a unicorn. And then that's what I decided. Therefore, I'm developing this idea already. That's bina. What's the chachma element in the bina? The chachma element in the bina is I'm going to build a new structure, but it's going to be the side of the structure is going to come from this nekuda. The side of the structure is going to come from this point of the koyach ischachos in every moment. The chachma is the koyach ischachos. I'm going to say, I just met you for the first time. I met you yesterday, and I met you the day before, and I met you the day before. True, but today I'm meeting you as a new you. Today I'm a new me, so I'm going to meet you new. And I'm going to have a barak, a mavrik, I'm going to have a conception of what I think about you. Wow, you're a tzaddik. You're always a tzaddik. But I'm saying a tzaddik, and they'll say, okay, now I'm going to be mefateach this chachma in the bina. This is the madrega. What does that do? That allows for the freedom of the das. That the freedom of the das should not be Godless das, but it should be Gula das, right? That a person should be in a state of a redemptive state. This is the koyach. This should be is the koyach from the chachma the na that comes down into das. That's l'chura what the Ramak is saying in such ideas. Okay, let's go back to the beginning of the bracha. We're talking about Einov and Yenu. So okay, this I've read the Priyas Chaim is open, so we'll just read the Priyas Chaim very quickly. Reina, that big Gvur Shabbat is already in the state of Gvur. This is the only shtickle on Priyas Chaim for Nari on what this tefillah is. Rosh Tev Reishon Beis. It'll be Reishon Beis. Shehem Ramach Evorm Shaba v'Oidal Devorm Yiseir Miramach Shebzacher. There is 248 Evorm. The Gemara says b'cheres for a zacher for the male, with another Dal Devorm connected to the female anatomy. Together base serum that base dalsa. The Gemara gives a marshal over there of two doors, etc. Sheberach Manukva v'Kulam Mitzalek Gvur Kenoida v'Hem Reishon Beis Evorm. The Rein Novin Yenu is in Mechav in the Gvur of Malchus. Okay. Which means, what Dari is saying in Oisis Pshutis is that we'll see soon. There's going to be Goel Chazek. There's going to be like a lot of Gvur in this tefillah, but in simple level, this is not a spashas of pure Chsadim because we're not talking about Gula Klolus. We're not saying that there's no Gvuris. We're saying that there's a Geula, there's a redemption in the state of a protistic Geula in my own personal life, even though the world is technically still in the state of Gvuris of Malchus of Gvura. We'll see soon how it also develops. But what do you have also from Re'enov and Yenu is pashat in the words, which is a very strange phrase. In all the tefillahs, you don't say Re'enor choleinu, and David should give us healing. Hashem, you should look at it, you see us that we're sick, give us healing. Baruch Aleinu, see that we're Re'enor, that we don't have sustenance, and give us sustenance. Why do we say by Re'enov and Yenu, and then Uguleinu Al Shemecha? What's the connection? Why Re'enov and Yenu? What's the Re'enov and Yenu? That the Eibush should look at us, and then through this the looking. So Be'emes, the pasuk, which talks about Yitzis Mitzrayim, the going out of Mitzrayim, which is the nekuda of the whole idea of Geula, is Vayar Lekim Es Bnei Yisrael Vayeda Lekim. That the pasuk actually says, when the Eibush tells Moshe Rabbeinu by the Sneh, is Vayar Lekim Es Bnei Yisrael. Hashem saw Klal Yisrael, and then Hashem remembered it. So what we're saying is like this: that on the simple madrega, what we're saying is like this. I remember this is what Rein of Yenu is. We're not saying that Hashem should see it. We're saying, we said many times, this is not a monologue, it's a dialogue. Rein of Yenu means I want to sense Rein of Yenu. What does that mean? It means we're asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we're saying like this, that we want to be seen. That's what it means. That I want to know that my life is being seen. That my life is not just, this is a very simple level, but a very deep level. Rein of Yenu means, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I want to live my life in the presence of knowing that I'm being seen. That my life is being observed. That my life is being watched over. right? The sensation of being seen is a very big thing. Being heard, of course, which will be Shma Kalenu. But even just...
No shir.
Huh?
V'harayon ain't no shir. It's one of the things that has no shir.
Exactly. So there is no shitak of this. To be seen is a very big thing. I don't mean looking at someone, because everyone's looking at everyone else. That doesn't mean anything. But you know when you're being seen by somebody, right? When someone looks at you really, and you feel like you're being seen, it's a whole different experience than being looked at, right? Being seen means that the person is taking notice of me, taking value to me, understanding that my life has meaning, understanding that I have importance. That's the act of being seen. But what?
When someone versus being watched.
Yeah. You watch, you looked.
Seen by the Arachantim.
No, exactly. Seen by the one eye of Aracham. These are the Lashon of the Ramban that the Schus L'chaim, that the Klal Yisrael passed through Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron HaKohen to be seen. The Schus L'chaim. Exactly, to be seen. This is what it is, to actually be to be the need and the want. Yeah, the idea of being seen is a very very important thing. That's the idea, to be seen, but even more boinik, which is, by the way, this in itself is already a gavaldic thing to daven like this. And Eino V'Yenu is really to say, I want when I finish when I say Goel Yisrael, I want to have a sensation, just like I've had tshuva sensation and a sensation of Bechila, and I feel light. I now feel that my life is being seen. I'm being really seen. You know, you can look at a person for 100 years, but you never actually see them. Yeah?
That's the lack of what you're saying before. Is seeing is a renewal. This is exactly what I'm saying. So Pshat is Reino and Yenu. How does it go with we say Goel Yisrael? The act of seeing could be two ways. Okay, you can just look at someone. I'm not talking about that. But in the act of real seeing somebody, really looking at them, you can do two things, and two things actually almost simultaneously do happen when you're truly seeing somebody or being seen. One is that the person is seeing you and holding you, but the act of seeing is also directed the other way. It's from the seer to the being seen. It's from the observer to the observed. Right? And that's why the observed that's being seen senses himself being seen, because they're being seen is not only that I holding you and I'm recognizing you and I'm seeing you, but I'm actually imprinting on you simultaneously as seeing you. Right? So the movement of in the ancient way of thinking, but the Shila Munah, one of the Einiklach of the Ramban writes the same thing. But it's from the Kadmonim that seeing is an act of two ways. It's from object to subject and subject to object, right? From the eye to the object to the subject. And now, we know differently today, but there's both movements. Dynamic.
Correct. Dynamic seeing, exactly, is both being seen and also recipient of the being seen.
But a static thing is will never move, whereas dynamic thing is in constant.
Correct. In constant dialogue. In constant movement. This is what we say, Re'eino V'Yenu. Re'eino V'Yenu means I want to be seen because I want to feel that my life has value and it's not just random struggles and tragedies or whatever I'm going through this world. My life is lived by the ultimate observer of life, and I'm being seen, and I'm also being affected by the seer of life. Because I'm being affected by, and that's why I'm like drawing in the being seen. And who is the seer? That's the Mechadish B'tuv B'chol Tomas Rishis. That's the one that renews creation at every moment. And if I'm being seen in that place, right? I see myself living in that place with the constantly schachas. The reason why I get stuck in my smallness or my small little stories and I got stuck in this little perception is because I saw myself yesterday, and that's the picture I took of myself, and that's who I am. But me and also all the friends, everyone around my life, I took that picture. Re'eino V'Yenu means I want to attach myself to the boira who's mischadish b'chol rega v'rega, who's constantly being renewed. I want to feel that my life is being seen. And by who? Seeing by the koyach of the Ein Sofius, the infinite koyach that's mischadish b'chol rega v'rega, and therefore I'm redeemed.
You understand? That's the process of the redemption, the redemptive process of my Godless, of my own personal Godless, is through the same process of being seen. Just by feeling the sensation of being seen allows you to constantly say, I'm not the person that I was yesterday. I'm not even the person that I was 5 minutes ago. And I have completely new koiches and new strengths and new potentials and new powers to do exactly what Hashem wants me to do on the highest level, because I'm not defining myself anymore. This is the re'ena v'yonenu v'rivenu. What's like? The river Rivenu is another shot. Yeah, what?
Does that then therefore give the person a personal obligation for change, or a b'tachon that Hashem will create the change, or is that one and the same?
Sorry, what?
So now I am seen, and
I'm being seen. Yes,
seen.
correct.
Now, do I need to take the first step and make that change of my Geula, or do I need to say, Hashem, now we are connected?
Of course.
Make that change.
Yeah, that's what you're davening. You're not make the change for Hashem. Doesn't.
Give me the.
We have to put ourselves in the position that we can open to the experience. That's what davening is, right? I'm putting myself in the right posture to be open to the sensation of letting go of all these things, saying I don't want to be stuck in these things. I want to feel with the sensation of being seen with the ever-present eye that's constantly mischadish b'chol rega v'rega, and that will allow me to feel and to actually experience, not only to feel seen and feel redeemed, but to live a redemptive life, to live in a place of a Gula Pratis, like the Baal Shem says. And we can't have Gula Klolus without Gula Pratis. We can't talk about a collective. You don't have the individual. We have to put ourselves into that experience and to be there.
But to work both ways, if we allow ourselves to tap in, then Hashem also sees us renewed.
Of course.
We see ourselves
Well,
renewed, and He sees us renewed.
Well, Hashem's always looking at ourselves renewed.
But if we're not tapped into Him,
Correct. No, then ki'ilu, we are an oivel avodah zarah. I don't want to say this chas shalom in a big word. In other words, then if our relationship to the Eibusher is in the same. By the way, this is such a big conversation because it talks about everything. Even thinking about if you think Hashem is today the same way you thought about Hashem yesterday, then that's dead. That's not a mischadash. Understand? That's already a certain. I'll give you a better example. If you learn the Torah Bereshis like you learned it when you were 6 years old, which most people do, because that's the easiest thing. It goes back to the autopilot. You remember the Rebbe said Bereshis bar, and you're reading the same thing. Then you're stuck in a certain dead, a certain idol of what. Then your relationship is not with the Elokim Chaim. It's not with the living God. Your relationship is don't make this Hashem Elokecha. This is already a this. This is what it is. Every day is new. Every day is a new because every day we're new, and every day we're being renewed. We get the sense of that being renewed.
Isn't it a clear way of just seeing it that a person cannot attain even physical health, which is the next bracha, without having this, we call it mental health because it's just like a good term, but like
it's absolutely,
absolutely.
Absolutely.
What I'm saying is like you're dead in the sense that there is no like physical health.
Correct. There's no possibility of physical health. No, this is all these feel like tshuva, Yisrael and tshuva, miyad henegalim. They're all giving steps. This is like if you go through the Shemoneh Esrei correctly, and you're going step by step. By the time you reach Shema Keleinu, it's not going to be Shema Keleinu. It's going to be obvious Shema Keleinu. You know what I'm saying? And they're saying, no, it's going to be sweet. Everything's you're going to be in that place. You're going to move. It's a derech melech. You're moving from shlav to shlav, right? It's not tshuva, slicha, gula, a random, three things that plop together, and you have to think one thing, one machshava. Everything works right. You have das, and therefore you have das. You have avdallah, you have tshuva, you have slicha, you have gula. You're moving. You're moving further and further inwardly, and then it's going to expand outwardly. Then it's going to expand inwardly in the collective, and then outwardly in the collective, right? And then it's moving. So the first three is going to be inward. Next three is going to be outward. Next three is going to be inward. Next three is going to be outward, both in the collective and individual. So you're moving in different directions. Now you're asking, what's the river rivenu? So there's two girsayis, even in the in the Ari. Some have Gula Shlema, and the Alter Rebbe.
First, what is the Onyenu?
The Onyenu is Onyenu. What's about the Onyenu? Danias. And
Oh, but if we're looking for that redemption.
no, you say Rein of Onyenu. See where we are now.
See us in our.
No. See us that we're struggling in this Onyenu vein Onyelu B'das in the state of the Danias, and help us see it in a correct way. Allow us to be open to see it in a correct way. When you're starting the tefillah, let's say it differently. When you're starting the tefillah, you're not feeling the gula. That's the whole point. You're feeling, I feel restrictive. I feel in the place of Godless Adas, right? I want to be open that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should give me through this process of tefillah. I should be open to Gulas Adas and Gulas Mitzrayim, Apratius. Rein over Yenu Veriva Grada. So the last four letters is Hey Aleph Vav Hey, which obviously is one of the shemas. What's the shame? The shame is Aleph Hey Vav Hey. So that's Shem of Kitz Laderech, exactly. Shem of Kitz Laderech is V'ava Yom Elohim, Eser Shemayim Ves Aretz, Eser Shemayim Ves Aretz. So the Ari says this is a name that's connected with Kitz Laderech, with quickening your ways. That's why it says so Rashi writes when Eliezer came to the ayin, came to the well, it says Ava Yom Elayim. He had Mikan Shekaftel Saderech. From here we know Kaftel Saderech. Says the Baal Shem Mikan. From the pasuk Ava Yom Elayim, in the Ava Yom Elayim, the first four letters is Aleph Hey Vav Hey. So Mikan Shekaftel Saderech from the psukim itself is Kaftel Saderech. What's the Kvitz Saderech? The Kvitz Saderech is this madreg. In other words, the Kvitz Saderech is when there's an opening, and there's that movement, then everything moves quickly. Everything's going quickly, and therefore it's Laman Shemecha. Why is it Laman Shemecha? What else do we have over here? That's one of a few other points, but let's see what we have here. So that the Alter Rebbe doesn't have Gula Shlema. The gears of the Alter Rebbe is not Gula Shlema. That's why it's 19 words, Tevis, not more. Because if you say Gula Shlema, then it's talking about the Gula Aklalis. So it's hard to say why you would say Gula Shlema. So the Alter Rebbe took out Gula Shlema in the Nusach of the Arik, and I think Gula Shlema, because then you'll have that it's a Gula Pratis, not a Gula Shlema. Gula Shlema is for collective. You don't have the Gula Shlema. But he said, Gulenu L'man Shemecha. Gulenu L'man Shemecha. So what's L'man Shemecha? So here's from the Shalach Kaddish Shtickle. So Bracha Gula, Gulenu Gula Shlema L'man Shemecha. Why? Vasaydu that Kashchina said Hashem and Echbad Yimon Megalas. But Mispav Shigalenik the Shigalas Atzmoi. Shkidei Shigalas Atzmoi. For Amar L'man Shemecha Shteit Hashchina Galusa. That Kol Makom Sheyisol Shchina Imam, which means that B'chol Saratzim Loitzar. If we're in a state of Galus, and Galus HaPrati, if there's a Galus HaPrati in our life that's Galus HaPrati, that we're in a state of exile, the Kaviyachal the Kadosh Baruch is in exile. V'Galei L'man Shemecha, we're saying that do yourself a favor, because if we're stuck, you're stuck. Yeah, if there's no this is really be'emes in everything, but particularly with regards to redemption, L'man Shemecha is then he says the Dvorim has the Lashonis over here.
This is on a protestic level.
There's a protestic level, Avada. I know. Kol Makom Shegal Shchina Imam. I just want to say very quickly. Kol Makom Shegal Shchina Imam is really a Gemara, right? The Gemara says in the Megillah. The Gemara actually talks about Beis Rabbeinu Shel Bavel. The Gemara actually talks about that Shechina Heichen Hoyso. If you look at the Gemara literally means a particular form of the Shechina. The Gemara asks how can be in a basic class that goes into a particular place. That Shechina Imam is in the base of the class, in the base of Medrash. That's literally the Gemara. But the way the Zohar and the Kabbalah learns it that Kol Tzaratzim Loy Tzar, Loy not with an Aleph, but Loy with a Vav. That Kol Makom Shegal Shechina Imam is the Shechina. Your particular Shechina. Your Shechina. There's the collective Shechina, there's a collective Shechina, and then there's the personal level of the Shechina. The Gulei L'man Shemecha means the personal Shechina is on Golus, because I'm in a state of Golus. And the Baal Shem, to finish off with the Baal Shem, there's a lot more to talk about, but there's a shtickle var tonight. Shamaite b'shem Baal Shem tepnei ma Shechina begolus. Bar Hashem Shemaim Nasav. Tzarech l'davar kol debur Hashem Shemaim kidol oir adi b'shnei v'maylam lashmiu no Shemaim l'chol. Al achshav v'seinu aram. Kol debireinu l'tayvus gufnis What's the Godless Hashchina? The Godless Hashchina, this goes back to the whole Torah of what Godless is. Godless really is Hadei Vadibur. Hadei Vadibur are two connected. When Rashi writes that V'hi L'adam Nefesh Chaya, Rashi writes, what does it mean to have a neshama? Rashi says Hadei Vadibur, like Hadei Vadibur L'chaya L'adam. Hadei is connected to Dibur. If you have correct das, you have correct Dibur speech. The Zohar says that in Godless Mitzrayim is Godless Hadibur. Godless Mitzrayim is Godless Hadibur. The Ari says that Godless Mitzrayim is also Godless Hadeya. But they're really part of the same thing. Why? Because it's also, Dibur is the way we express ourselves in this world. That the Dibur is the expression that we have in this world. How are we being expressed in the world? The Dibur is really the Shechina. The Madrega is the Shechina. The Shechina is a Shechina is what's vested in the creation. Our Dibur is a reflection of what the Shechina's presence is. If we speak Narishkeit, which means our expressions are not correct, why are expressions correct? Why do we have Diburim that are not? Because our Machshavas are not correct, right? Because you have in the Lashon of the Baal Shem, you have Machshavas Zaras, and therefore your Diburim are not correct. Which means if your and Zaras doesn't mean negative, and we're talking about Machshavas that you're stuck and you can't, and it's not able, and you're and the whole Golus Hadibur we talked about, a Golus Hadas, which you talked about, which means the constriction of that state of mind. When you do that, you also express it that way, and therefore your expression, your Dibur is Begolus. What's the Gulas Hadibur? And this is why it's negated to daven. This is the tefillah. When a person says what is a person doing? A person is not only thinking about the process of Gula, of redemption of das. A person is actually goyel his dibur, which is his shechina, which is his bitoy. He's goyel his dibur through tefillah. The act of tefillah itself is the gulas hadibur. You're following? In other words, when a person daven Shemon Esrei, right, and says what's the chilik of a person daven Shemon Esrei or thinks all these machshavas? Right? A person says, Hashem, you should watch me. What kind of person is walking through? Hashem, I want to feel watched. I want to be feeling watched by the Mischadish B'chol Rega V'Rega, by the renewal. I want to sense, I don't want to be stuck in this constricted state of minds. I want to be open and expansive, Gevaldik. But the problem is you're not Mizbata B'dibur, and then later, 5 minutes later, you're talking about Lashon Hara or L'chilus L'tzanos. You're talking something negative, which means you're pulling everything down. You're pulling everything down, which means your koyach that's Mizbata, things that is reflected is not going. But when a person davens, therefore, his Maila is Dibur. So when you Maila the Dibur, when you say Kikel Go Yisrael, that Hashem is a Go Yisrael, you're saying, why is the Eibusha Go Yisrael? Because I just did it. I had the Machshava, and I had the Dibur. The Dibur was a redemptive speech, because the Dibur was with Machshava, correct Machshava, and the Dibur was a holy Dibur, and I'm Goyal, my Shechina, a Proteus. And now I want throughout the day that all affects everything that I'm going to do throughout the day should be in that revelation. Understand? So the Dibur gives the koyach in the Maisa, in the tangible way that I'm actually experiencing the Gula.
Should have done this in the morning.
Yeah, I should have done this in the morning, exactly.